Hey guys, it's Cam from Craft and Tailored, and in this episode of What Is On My Wrist, we are talking about a 1996 white dial Rolex Explorer II reference 16570, aka the Polar. So this is a watch that I think would fall into what we would classify as the neo-vintage realm of vintage-ish Rolex sport models. We're kind of calling this up neo-vintage because it's not really vintage, but it's not really modern. It's kind of in between what we would consider traditional vintage and like hardcore modern. How about that? Hardcore modern. Really interesting watch. We just wrote an article and posted it on our blog. I'll provide a link up here so that you can check it out. But it talks about undervalued Rolex models. And I think that there is this kind of feeling that, oh, it's Rolex, it's gonna be expensive for sure. And although it's not cheap, I think that within the Rolex range, there are watches that are definitely still sleepers and also provide a lot of value for what it is that they are. And I think that the 16570 definitely falls into that category and there's a lot of great cool stuff within these watches that we talk about in this article that I think are interesting and worth looking at for sure. I'm a fan of the Explorer II. Now, in another video where I talk about the 1655, the orange hand Explorer II, I keep pointing up because I'll provide a link so that you guys can check out that video as well. But, you know, I kind of have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with that watch because although it was a watch that was developed for a specific purpose, it's a very confusing watch, it's hard to read. The 24-hour hand on the watch tells you the 24-hour time with a non-rotating bezel. So unless you're really underground or on a submarine, you know if it's AM or PM, right? And it makes it really hard to track a separate time zone. What's interesting is the Rolex 16570 was introduced in 1989, and it was a predecessor to the 16550. In the Rolex 16550 in reference 16570, although they look similar, they do have some major differences. Instead of the watch just offering a quick set date in a GMT hand, it actually offers a jumping hour hand. So it's really interesting. And what's also really interesting is the earlier movement. If you jump this hour hand, you can actually see the GMT hand wiggle. And so that's one thing that is, I think, kind of interesting and something that I'll use to like quickly pick up a watch. I'll jump the hour hand around, and if it wiggles, I know that it has a 3185. The reason why that is significant in this watch, and the reason why I think that offers a value from a horological perspective, right, is that previously, if you just rotated the minute and the hour hand, it would rotate the GMT hand, right? And this is a fixed bezel, so you can't track a separate time zone. But what's interesting is if you basically set your GMT hand, right, and then you jump your hour hand, you can now track multiple time zones with this watch, making it functional and relevant, right, as a standalone piece. One thing that I think is really, really interesting is that it's really the only white dialed Rolex sports watch. If you wanted another white dial Rolex sports watch, it would probably be a Pan Am GMT, and we're talking about an $850,000 to maybe a $2 million watch. The other thing too is that it possesses a black handset and black white gold surrounds. So what most people don't know, what's interesting about this dial and handset is that the hands are actually white gold. The plots on the dial are black, but they're actually enameled white gold. So that's kind of interesting and kind of crazy. To think that Rolex is using not steel or not brass, they're using white gold and they're actually enameling those with black. The thing that's kind of cool though is that it really allows the markers and the hands to jump off of the white dial, whereas in the Daytona, the hands kind of tend to blend in with the dial a little bit because they're white gold, so a little bit more monochromatic, right? So very high visibility watch. The other thing too is the red arm of the GMT hand really jumps off of a white dial as opposed to the black. So the watch wears really nice. I also like these on either a Jubilee bracelet or a OD green NATO strap. For whatever reason, green with the white and the red really just pops. It kind of sets me off. So it sets me off, Nick. You know what I'm saying? Hold on, a little sip of coffee. Highly caffeinated today. Mega caffeinated. Very nice wearing watch on wrist. I really love the jumping hour hand. It's very functional. One other thing that's interesting is I've seen a couple of these come on Jubilees. I don't think they were necessarily offered, but I think that by Rolex on a Jubilee, but I think that the authorized dealer, if you walked in back in the 1990s, obviously this one's from 1996 and you were like, I need a Jubilee on this watch, they would have done it for you. But it's on an Oyster bracelet. I like it on the Oyster. But what's interesting about this is instead of it being just kind of a normal pressure fit type of clasp, right? Like the earlier variants or like within like an Explorer 1, this actually has a stubby flip lock clasp. So what's interesting, non-diver's extension, right? Because it's not really a diving watch. You obviously could take this into the water. It's Oyster and it's pressure rated and whatever. But it's a smaller clasp. It's not like a larger clasp. No dive extension, and then it also possesses a flip lock, which is kind of cool. The other thing too is I travel a lot, and although I probably should be traveling with watches that are more appropriate for my travel, but I'm normally traveling with watches and chasing down stuff, so I'm wearing just interesting shit all the time. But I know, I'm so unfortunate I get to wear these awesome watches. I know, but in any case, the thing that I think is kind of cool is that, you know, let's say you're in LA and you're going to New York. Okay, so there's a 3-hour time difference. Instead of like flipping the hands around in 24-hour intervals, right? You're literally just jumping the hour hand. And I think that that is like so cool and so functional while having an independently set GMT hand. These watches are definitely creeping up in terms of desirability and in value. You used to be able to get these watches very inexpensively, and now they are, you know, creeping up in value and in desirability, especially the white dial versions of the Explorer II reference 16570. I think they're also, again, getting harder and harder to find. Good examples are being, you know, snapped up by the collectors, and they're still relatively accessible. If you were to look at a GMT, which essentially is the same exact watch, same mid-case dimensions, same movement, you know, all that stuff, it basically just has a rotating bezel. You're gonna be looking at probably 10 grand entry price point for a Pepsi or Coke GMT of similar era. These watches are in like the 7s, 75, really, really good examples are in the 8s. I would say box papers examples are in the high 8s to low 9s. So you get a lot of watch for a lot of money, and they're kind of an undervalued reference. And again, very comfortable on wrist, very functional watch that can kind of go from the boardwalk to the boardroom, as they say, and definitely a favorite watch that I think is increasing in popularity. So that's why I kind of wanted to talk about it. We got a nice example in, and I've been wearing it, and very functional and fun piece to obtain and collect. So I'll provide a link in the description below. Also, be sure to check out that article where we talk about neo vintage and kind of the undervalued Rolex models, because I think Rolex is an incredible brand, but some people are afraid to get into Rolex because they think it's expensive and kind of like this elitist thing. And there's still a lot of stuff out there that is accessible and also worth collecting and worth chasing down. So I'll provide a link to that article as well. Be sure to, of course, as always, like, comment, and subscribe. We love you guys. We appreciate your feedback. And for the latest updates, be sure to check us out on Instagram. So if you're not following us already, be sure to hit the follow button on that. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys in the next one. See you there.